Bir ateş ver, cigaramı yakayım. Sen salın gel, ben boyuna bakayım. Uzun
Over 8,000 miles from the east coast of Florida, Turkey precariously spans the border between Europe and Asia and bridges the gap between Eastern and Western cultures. The political borders of Turkey encircle a geographical region known as Anatolia, which is thought to be the cradle of civilization. Both the Tigris and Euphrates rivers begin in Turkey. Ruins of great Hittite, Persian, Roman, and Ottoman civilizations dot the landscape as if they were still alive. Descendants of the first disciples of Christ still congregate in a small cave which is thought to be the first Christian church. Concerts are still performed in ancient amphitheaters. Ruins and artifacts continue to be found every time someone ventures to the mountains, the desert, the sea floor, or in our case, the caves. The sharp contrasts that define Turkey are perhaps an outgrowth of the diverse natural setting. Turkey is a small country compared to the United States. It is roughly 1,000 miles long and 500 miles wide, or about the size of Texas. However, in that relatively small space, there is a great diversity in climate and landscape. There are 4 climatic regions that vary from desert conditions in the interior to dense, wet forest along the Black Sea coast. Asiatic Turkey includes a belt of young mountain ranges that encircle the Anatolian Plateau. The Pontic Mountains follow the Black Sea coast to the north, and the extensively karstified Taurus Mountains border the Aegean and Mediterranean seas to the west and south. Karst landscapes, which are created by the dissolution of limestones and dolomites, cover most of Turkey and often extend from deep submarine plateaus up to the high mountain peaks. Magnificent springs, disappearing rivers, sinkholes, and extensive dry cave systems can be found throughout the country. Several local communities and even large cities depend solely on spring water for drinking and irrigation. Water flowing downhill from mountain springs is also used for hydroelectric power and is often capable of supporting the electric needs of a town or city. In the Taurus Mountains, caves have had spiritual significance for people of countless religions. They have been used as churches, burial sites, and places of refuge. And today, they still provide shelter for goat herders and nomadic people crossing the mountains. It was to explore, map, and document some of the underwater cave systems in the Taurus Mountains that the Karst Dive project set out to accomplish. The biggest problem that had to be overcome in order to conduct any serious exploration in Turkey was obtaining equipment. We decided that the only solution would be to bring all the necessary equipment from the United States. Lufthansa Airlines, Atlas Magazine, the NSS-CDS, and the NACD all sponsored this effort by contributing to the cost of shipping nearly 1,500 pounds of equipment from Miami, Florida to Ankara, Turkey. Unfortunately, there were plenty of unforeseen difficulties with orchestrating such a large international shipment. In each case, the unforeseen delays put a serious crimp in our timetable. Once we received the equipment in Ankara, it was trucked 330 miles over the Taurus Mountains to the targeted caves near the Mediterranean coast. We set up our base station in Antalya at the Kepez electric plant. Kepez was exceptionally interested in our project because they used spring water to generate hydroelectric power. Kepez served as an ideal base station. They provided us with ample indoor space to keep all the equipment. They also provided the electricity necessary for our compressor and battery chargers. Once more, our new home was part of their machine shop, an amazing bonus for any expedition, especially when the Kepez staff fabricated special adapters to connect American and European gas fittings. By the time we got to Kepez each year, every minute was precious. Equipment was unloaded and assembled immediately after the truck pulled into the gate. Luckily, the oxygen and helium provided by British Oxygen Supply was waiting for us at the Kepez plant. So in both cases, we made our first dive on the same day we arrived in Antalya. From then on, sleep and relaxation were luxuries, as every day was spent either diving or moving equipment up and down the mountain, or a combination of the both. We knew that there had been a Yugoslavian expedition to Kirkgöz Suluin some years before, but we only had a sketchy report and a map of the cavern. So on our first afternoon in Antalya, we loaded up a four-wheel drive truck from Kepez and drove out to the mountains. Following directions from the Yugoslav report, we bounced down rocky roads, crisscrossed streams and canals, and slowly pushed through herds of goats looking for Kirkgözler Springs. Kirkgözler, literally translated, means 40 eyes, but more appropriately describes several springs that discharge from the Taurus Mountains where they meet the high Travertine Plateau above Antalya. Kirkgöz Suluin, the largest known cave in the region, was our primary target. On our first day, we parked near one of the larger springs and searched the mountainside for the big cave. Finding it brought a great sense of excitement as we looked down on a crystal clear pond from the large cavern entrance that was hidden behind thick trees and brush. Unfortunately, the elated feeling quickly passed as we looked 300 feet down and nearly a mile back at the truck. The logistics of moving the equipment to the water's edge were anything but trivial. We made 4 dives into Kirkgöz Suluin in 1995 and 4 more in 1996. Diving there for the first time revealed an enormous cavern where our cave lights refracted cobalt blue off the brilliant white walls covered with elaborate speleothems. A thick nylon line leading into the cavern marked the past presence of the Yugoslavian team, but it extended for less than 100 feet. After that, ours would be the first human eyes to behold whatever lay ahead. The Taurus Mountain limestones were deposited between the Cretaceous and Tertiary periods some 60 to 140 million years ago in a shallow sea. The same tectonic forces that carved the Alps in Europe pushed up these great mountains. During the collision of the continental plates in this region, the limestones were literally squashed, destroying nearly all of the original porosity. Later, they were thrust up and in some places stacked into units over 3,000 feet thick. Since then, rainwater has been dissolving the rock, creating the karst landscape that includes the caves. Essentially, the cave systems here are examples of vuggy porosity, where relatively small conduits connect huge dissolved chambers. Instead of following a large conduit into the earth, cave exploration amounts to squeezing through small cracks or breakdown passages into enormous chambers. A distinct boundary was discovered at 150 feet below the water surface, marking the deepest extent of speleothem development. Speleothems only form in dry caves through the precipitation of calcium carbonate by dripping water. Their presence 150 feet below the water's surface marks the extent of past water table fluctuations and gives testament to the dynamic geologic history of the Taurus Mountains. Though most of the cave passages trend at 100 to 150 feet below the water's surface, a 300-foot-long restriction that plunges to over 270 feet deep blocks access to the majority of the cave. Unfortunately, that restriction necessitated the use of trimix, a mixture of helium and air in a stage bottle for every dive. A second stage bottle of trimix was used for later exploration into a deep tunnel that dropped to over 320 feet. Nitrox, air enriched with oxygen, and oxygen were used on each dive as decompression gases. Returning to the cavern, we saw that Gokhan and Zafer had found several ancient artifacts. Small pots and pieces of larger amphoras and water jars littered the floor of a debris slope below the water surface. Apparently, ancient people had thrown the relics into the water long ago, perhaps as a ceremonial offering, or if today's practices are any kind of model, they might have been simply tossing out the trash. In any case, it is certain that Kirkgöz Suluin provided an important source of fresh water to people living in the region as it still does today. Since nothing was found in place or further into the cave, it doesn't appear that the cave was occupied in a period of lower water level. However, archaeologists have found evidence of ancient habitation in another cave less than 500 yards from Kirkgöz Suluin.
Yetiş anam, yetiş anam.
To limit the workload, most of the equipment was left in the cave for the duration of the exploration in Kirkgöz Suluin. A small compressor was set up at the cave entrance to fill air bottles and facilitate remixes on site. However, the large oxygen and helium cylinders provided by British Oxygen Supply had to be left at Kepez due to their weight. That meant that any tanks needing those gases had to be hauled in and out of the cave for each dive. Luckily, we were able to maintain air in the heavy doubles, which meant that they only had to be hauled in and out once. Scooters were key to the success of the exploration as they permitted excursions out to 3,000 feet from the entrance with a modest gas supply. Unfortunately, the Techna scooters used in 1995 were not suited for the rugged conditions in the mountains or the depths we would later encounter at Finike. Thankfully, American Underwater Lighting contributed their more capable Predator scooters to the project, facilitating further exploration and research on the 1996 expedition. Since new cave was encountered on every dive, decompression tables had to be constantly modified for new depth profiles. Usually, that meant calculating decompression profiles in the cave with a laptop computer and Abdur Chowdhury's decom program. Even still, the decompression tables hardly ever fit the actual dive, and the profile ended up being a combination of a decom table and guesswork. It was crucial, however, to err on the side of conservatism, as the nearest recompression chamber was over 100 miles away. Subsequent dives in Kirkgöz Suluin revealed passages of ever-increasing beauty and size. Passing through the deep restriction, we encountered room after room where boulders the size of cars and houses littered the floor. The walls maintained their snow-white color and the water was cobalt blue. On the third dive, we passed through a tunnel seemingly carved out of large flakes of breakdown into a room so large that our lights seemed to be swallowed up by a black hole. As if out of necessity for explanation, the room was dubbed the stadium. Eventually, it was measured to be over 300 feet long by 200 feet wide and 150 feet from floor to ceiling. At one point, the roof extends above the water surface into as yet unknown elevation. White walls, crystal clear water, and huge rooms showered with flowstone all made the place seem like a cave diver's paradise. But all good things have their problems, as every expelled breath dislodged a fine white silt from the ceiling that dramatically reduced the visibility. Low flow conditions in the cave prevented the silt from dissipating between dives, further reducing the visibility in the closer reaches of the system. Unfortunately, none of the dives for this project could be allocated for pleasure. Each newly discovered passage demanded detailed survey for the three-dimensional models we set out to produce. Since time was extremely limited, most of the video and photography was collected as the exploration proceeded. Adding to the task load, we also collected water samples and conducted dye traces in conjunction with scientists at Gokhan, a Karst research center at Hacettepe University in Ankara. The water samples are being used to date the groundwater and determine the source of recharge. The dye tracing was conducted to determine if the Taurus Mountain aquifer is connected to a lower travertine aquifer that augments the water supply to Antalya. On the last dive in Kirkgöz Suluin, Jarrod and I collected water samples. Jarrod spooled out 800 feet of line into a new passage, while I surveyed behind him. We released uranine dye in the stadium for a tracer test, and Barry caught it all on film while it happened. All totaled, we explored and mapped over 4,000 feet of underwater cave passages in the Kirkgöz Springs region, including more than 3,000 feet in the Kirkgöz Suluin system and more than 1,000 feet in the smaller Kirkgöz Spring Cave. This is a three-dimensional model of the Kirkgöz Suluin cave system. Here, the colors mark changing depth, but they could just as easily show water chemistry or velocities given the right data. Future models will also be able to relate the size and orientation of the conduits to local topography, water levels, or even geologic structures. Probing into the depths of Kirkgöz Suluin revealed conduits extending deep enough into the Taurus Mountain limestone to provide a possible hydraulic connection to the lower travertines. The presence of speleothems in the Kirkgöz Suluin system demonstrates the extent of past water table fluctuations. Earlier in its existence, the large cavern entrance was undoubtedly a tremendous spring, discharging water from the cave system. Since then, the Kirkgöz springs have developed in response to the lower water table and have probably never been dry. The more developed Kirkgöz Suluin cave system is now a collection point for water raining on the barren Taurus Mountain karst. next goal was to probe into the Antalya Travertine Plateau, a broad carbonate shelf extending for over 300 square miles from the base of the Taurus Mountains into the Mediterranean Sea. Karst development in the Travertine Plateau is very different from that in the Taurus Mountains, even though the two provinces are so close together. The travertines, comprising the plateau, are much younger than the mountain limestones and formed through the precipitation of calcium carbonate from the ancient discharge of the Kirkgöz springs. The travertines have spread out below the mountain springs and have never been exposed to great tectonic stresses. The plateau is divided into 3 levels that formed in response to past sea level stands. Kirkgöz springs discharge to the uppermost level where the travertines meet the Taurus Mountains. The city of Antalya lies in the middle level, and the lowermost level extends out from the coast into the Mediterranean Sea. Düden Başı, or Düden Spring, was the focus of our exploration efforts in the Travertine Plateau. Düden is the largest spring in southern Turkey, discharging a minimum of 200 million gallons of water per day. It is located on the middle level of the plateau, approximately 7 miles northeast of Antalya. Düden was chosen because it is the primary discharge point for all groundwater flow through the Travertine aquifer. The spring is situated at the base of a 40-foot cliff beneath a beautiful waterfall created by water flowing from the Kirkgöz springs. A small winding passage through the Travertine leads down behind the waterfall to the spring basin. The two waters combine to form the Düden River, which flows directly to the coast, dropping over more travertine cliffs into the Mediterranean Sea. The area surrounding Düden has been developed into a state park. In the summer, hundreds of people per day come from all over the world to swim and picnic and marvel at the unique karst setting. In order to explore Düden, special permits had to be obtained from the Turkish State Hydraulic Works, known as DSI. After the permits were obtained, the park staff helped carry all the equipment down through the small access cave to the water's edge. Spectators gathered round as the equipment was assembled and the exploration got underway. And when the word of the exploration effort spread, government officials and news crews showed up to watch and ask questions. Unfortunately, the visibility in the cave system was not sufficient for videography or photography. The exploration dives did, however, reveal important information about the hydrology and environmental conditions in the Travertine aquifer. Düden is a single conduit cave system trending northwest from the spring basin. High-velocity water discharging from the entrance makes swimming into the system practically impossible. The water is highly turbid, in which visibility averaging no more than 10 feet greatly hampered exploration efforts. Exploration into Düden proceeded delicately with the use of DPVs along the south wall. A single conduit averaging 20 feet in diameter was mapped for 1,500 feet and reached a maximum depth of 198 feet. Exploration terminated in a large room from which the only exit was through a vertical shaft that continued up shallower than 100 feet. Düden was not as clean or attractive as the Kirkgöz caves. The floor was covered with a thick deposit of mud and silt. The walls appeared brown-gray and were often covered with algae and bacteria. No speleothems were encountered, indicating that the cave has never been dry for significant periods of geologic time. No artifacts were discovered, although a great deal of trash and coins were removed from the spring basin. Jarrod's curious discovery of a beer can at the base of the vertical shaft more than 1,500 feet from the cave entrance indicated a direct surface connection somewhere further upstream. Algal and bacterial growth and the reduced water clarity indicate that sewage disposal practices on the Travertine may have reduced water quality in the Travertine aquifer. Researchers at Hacettepe University and officials with DSI are currently using the findings of this exploration project to investigate these environmental concerns and effect change in local land use and water quality regulations. The final target for the Karst Dive expedition took us back to the Taurus Mountains, but over 100 miles from our base station in Antalya. The site was a reputedly deep cave known as Finike Suluin, or Injili Mara, located southwest of the town of Finike on the Mediterranean coast. 5 dives were made at Finike Suluin, necessitating 3 trips from Antalya with a caravan of several trucks and cars. Once again, we had very little information about the cave and weren't even sure of its exact location. A French team had apparently explored the cavern but never produced a map or report. Luckily, the cave entrance was very close to the highway that hugged the Mediterranean coast and well marked as a point of interest. Unfortunately, though, we found another obstacle as the water surface was separated from the road by a 300-foot hill of rock and mud. It was hard to resist the temptation of exploring the sea instead, but we finally began the arduous task of hauling equipment up and into the cave. To be prepared for whatever depths Finike might have had in store for us, doubles were mixed with rich trimix, 13% oxygen and 50% helium, and air, nitrox, and oxygen were brought along for decompression. Decompression tables were prepared for depths ranging between 250 and 330 feet for times ranging between 25 and 55 minutes in 5-minute intervals. The water in the basin was extremely clear, but the surface was covered with green, slimy algae. We soon realized that the entire system was saline, though fresh water was apparently flowing in near the surface, creating 2 fuzzy haloclines. Dropping under the algae and penetrating the haloclines revealed an enormous cavern later measured to be over 240 feet in diameter. Huge stalactites hung from the ceiling, and giant boulders and fallen slabs littered the floor. Descending into the cavern felt like a free fall with no end to the angled floor in sight. We left our Turkish teammates in the cavern at 150 feet and followed the ceiling down. Making line wraps around huge stalactites, we kept following the ceiling, not being able to see the floor or the far wall. A vertical white wall, 800 feet from the entrance and 300 feet deep at the top, marked the final descent into the abyss. From there, the tunnel dropped another 100 feet beneath us. Once again in free fall, we descended to the bottom and secured the survey line at 390 feet to the top of a large fallen boulder. At that point, the floor easily exceeded 400 feet, but the conduit apparently terminated in a small room. Not having the dive or decompression gas necessary for any more exploration, we began our ascent. Back at the top of the wall in 300 feet of water and 800 feet from the surface, the seemingly tiny sunlit entrance led the way home. Back at the entrance, the long decompression gave plenty of time to survey the cavern at various depths and study the artifacts found by our teammates. Subsequent dives in the following year gave us the necessary time to collect more video footage, survey the other wall, make cross-sectional measurements, and collect scientific observations. The Predator scooters provided by American Underwater Lighting gave us the freedom to collect all the necessary data without having to worry about the extreme pressure crushing a scooter housing. Clearly, the conduit at Finike Suluin has been dissolved out of a pure, dense limestone. Bedding, or the layering of limestone units, is evident in both walls. The giant stalactites were traced down to 250 feet, marking the lowest extent of past water tables, which correlate to ancient sea level stands. Giant slabs of rock covered with stalactites lying on the floor indicate that at least part of the cavern development occurred by stoping, or the upward expansion of a chamber into a rock unit. Because of our exploration efforts, researchers from Hacettepe University are now working with divers from the Underwater Research Society to learn more about Finike Suluin. Stalactite samples are being studied to determine the age of past sea level fluctuations, and water samples are being collected to measure water stratification in the transition zone between salt and fresh waters of a coastal aquifer. At the end of the 2-year effort, Project Karst Dive resulted in the exploration, mapping, and documentation of over 6,000 feet of new cave passages, most of which were in excess of 200 feet deep. The stadium in Kirkgöz, Suluin, marked the discovery of one of the largest underwater chambers in the world, and Finike Suluin was established as the deepest submerged cave in the Mediterranean region. Once more, the concepts of safe cave diving, research diving, and deep diving have now expanded into another society where the diving community is extremely eager to learn and develop its own programs. Important scientific data was collected that will help the Turkish government develop and protect the region's precious groundwater resources. Observations of cave development in Turkey's complicated geologic setting have already broadened our understanding of karst processes and have provided great impetus for future work. But probably the most significant accomplishment of the Karst Dive project was the act of bridging the cultural gap between East and West. American and Turkish divers and researchers worked together to accomplish a common goal. As a result, we have greatly expanded our knowledge and understanding of caves and karst, of diving, of our cultures, and of ourselves. The Karst Dive project only succeeded through the support and cooperation of all participating individuals and organizations. No amount of money or expertise could have taken the place of teamwork, patience, and determination.
Like a raindrop, she's got the look. Heavenly bound, cause heaven's got a number when she's spinning me around. Kissing is a color, a loving is a wild dog. She's got the look. 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 What in the world can make a brown-eyed girl turn blue? When everything I'll ever do, I do for you. And I go la 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 la. She's got the look. Fire in the eyes, naked to the bone as a lover's disguise. Banging on the head drum, shaking like a mad bull. She's got the look. Swaying through the band, moving like a hammer. She's a miracle man. Loving is the ocean, kissing is the wet sand. She's got the look. 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 What in the world can make a brown-eyed girl turn blue? When everything I'll ever do, I do for you. And I go la 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 la. She's got the look. like a hammer, she's a juvenile scam. Never was a quitter, tasted like a raindrop. She's got the look. And she goes na 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 na. She's got the look. She's got the look. She's got the look. She's got the look. What in the world can make a brown-eyed girl turn blue? When